reanudar la grabación de nuestra conferencia virtual. Entonces sean todos bienvenidos. Hay una cosa importante y es que ASOCIO tiene como uno de sus objetivos una iniciativa de la comunidad colombiana de investigación de operaciones para desarrollar, mejorar, aplicar, difundir y promocionar los métodos y aplicaciones de la investigación de operaciones en cualquiera de sus ramas, así como las iniciativas que tiendan al máximo aprovechamiento de este conocimiento en beneficio de la sociedad. Y de esta manera es que tenemos iniciativas como las conferencias virtuales, tutoriales y otro montón de cosas que hacemos, el Congreso Bienal, el boletín y otras iniciativas más, observatorio, y hemos venido creciendo. En parte a través de las afiliaciones individuales, pero también a través de las afiliaciones individuales de algunas universidades, que aquí pueden ver los miembros institucionales que tenemos en este momento como universidades afiliadas en ASOCIO. Y en particular, las conferencias virtuales tienen como objetivo difundir entonces en este espacio en el que podemos hacer difusión con la comunidad de investigación operativa para los objetivos estratégicos de desarrollo, reunión y divulgación. No siendo más, ya pasó la presentación de ASOCIO, ahora le vamos a dar paso a Jan Boeckmann, que es nuestro conferencista. Él en particular es de la Universidad Johannes Kepler de la Universidad Linz en Austria, en el Instituto de Business Analytics and Technology Transformation, fue el ganador pues fue miembro del equipo ganador del Europrize for the Common Good de este año. Entonces es un placer tener a Jan hoy con nosotros. Yo le agradezco a Nubia y a la Universidad de los Andes, que son quienes propiciaron esta presentación, ya que lo tienen a él como invitado en sus instalaciones. Y sin más preámbulos, Jan, I'm sorry because I was speaking in Spanish, but now we are going to switch to English. I don't know if Nubia wants to make another annotation. If not, I'm going to move and give you the audience is yours, and go ahead with your conference.
All right.
The only thing that I would want to add is that Jan took the initiative to contact us to organize that activity. Then thank you very much, Jan, for contacting us. If you need something, please let us know.
All right, I'll surely do that. Before I start, I want to as well thank Nubia a lot and Juan for organizing this talk. This absolutely wouldn't have been possible without your help. And I think it's great. We as a society of operations research can just connect internationally and maybe benefit from one or the other experience. And I'll just then share my slides. And yeah, we're starting with that. So I basically brought two presentations, and the reason for it is that the talk consists of two parts. And I had LaTeX slides for the one part, and I had PowerPoint slides for the other one. So I just have two sets of slides, so don't get confused if you see that 14 down there. We will have more slides than that. Okay, but let's start. This is joint work with Florian Meyer and Clemens Thielen, both from TU Munich, where I did my PhD. And yeah, let's get right into it. So overall, this talk is subdivided, as I've mentioned, into two parts. So in the first part, we will see the problem of assigning physicians to duties in the hospital. So as you all researchers, you all know how great night shifts are. And if you imagine a hospital, there you have night shifts quite regularly because patients arrive quite regularly and not only during days. So somehow you will have to find a somewhat fair methods to assign physicians to a hospital. In the second part, I will talk a bit about what I did in my PhD and what I'm currently, I think, doing most of my time if I'm not teaching. So this is finding high quality flood mitigation concepts. It's a bit of one of the niche projects in operations research, but I'm always glad to talk about it. And the very special part where this talk also focuses a lot on is that both of these algorithms have been implemented in an interactive web application. So, and this is widely, or both are being widely used in practice. And what I want to focus on is maybe how we can use our science and bring it to life in practice. So let's start with the first problem, which is about physician rostering. And of course, as I've just explained, somehow physicians have to be assigned special duties in a hospital. And those duties are not necessarily pretty, such as night shifts or shift at the intensive care unit, which are just very intense and stressful. So a fair distribution of those impacts a hospital's smooth operation, and also, and that's very important, the employee satisfaction, because if a physician quits their job, that's really, really bad for a hospital. So the problem with that is that you have various objectives. So you want to find a somewhat fair distribution, but at the same time, you want to have like a good coverage. And we will see more about the objective function later. So this makes the rostering quite difficult. And the structure of this shift, of those rostering requirements, they vary substantially between different departments or hospitals. And this leads to, well, there's no out-of-the-box software, at least not right now. And this means that physician rosters are, in practice, actually often still generated manually. And this leaves us with two problems. First problem is it's a huge waste of time. Normally, it's a physician who generates the roster, so that's a highly qualified person. You want that person to work on somewhat productively and not generating a roster, right? And the second thing is that this roster is usually far from being optimal, whatever you would call optimal. So in the part one of this talk, we will see an adaptable physician rostering system and its application at various medium-sized departments and hospitals. We're currently applying this software in those three hospitals. So Heidelberg, if you have not been there, I highly recommend you to visit Heidelberg. It's a beautiful city. I've lived there for 2 years. Then Straubing, that's where I did my PhD. It's not necessarily as pretty as Heidelberg, but still worth visiting. And then we have Kaiserslautern, where I actually did my bachelor's degree. If you're in Kaiserslautern, better go to Heidelberg. And so as a short outline of that talk, we will first come up with a problem definition and show you the different clinical structures. Then we have an excerpt of a general mixed integer programming model. We will see how this all can be customized in a user-friendly web interface. And then we'll also leave some notes on real-world data and how we perform on that. And also I will give you a short outline of what I want to do with this in the future. So let's start with the problem definition. We always have a planning period. So planning period is a certain time frame for which I want to generate my roster. And then we also have physicians with different qualifications, such as practical training or experience in intensive care unit or chest pain unit or whatever you might imagine. And those qualification shifts can be mandatory or desired. For example, if somebody has to take the intensive care unit, they definitely need to know a bit about whatever you need to know in an intensive care unit. So the really, emergency things. And there are also desired qualification, such as, for example, a certain certificate that might not be mandatory, but you'd rather have. What we also have is a flexible number of wards or teams that physicians belong to. So those teams are usually the teams that operate one part of a hospital. And then we have two kinds of shifts. And the first shifts are the ward or the team duties. So there's a minimum and a maximum or desired number of physicians for those duties. and only physicians of the corresponding team can be assigned to this duty. And then there are other duties that are covered by a single physician, such that, as for example, a night shift. They are usually covered by a single physician, and there every physician can be assigned. So it's only important that there is a physician. It doesn't depend which ward they belong to. And this also could exist on special days, such as Christmas, for example. Well, then we have resting times after shifts, which means if you had a night shift, you cannot work the day after the night shift, obviously. And those resting times can be, it can vary across the shifts. The shifts can be, well, some of the shifts are assigned on a daily basis, and some of them are also assigned on weekly blocks, which means sometimes there's a situation that if somebody has the night shift on Friday, I also want to have this physician to take the night shift on the following Saturday. So that is what we call a block. And the important thing about the software is that in the software, the physicians can state the preferences for the duties on specific days. So if their best friend has a wedding or they have to prepare something for that wedding, they can enter in our software, I really don't want to work that shift on that day. And then our software hopefully will not assign this physician to the shift they don't desire. And if they feel like, yeah, my wife's also working night shift that day, so I might as well do it that day, they can also enter that they would like to take that shift. To show you the difference in between hospitals, I just took two of our hospitals, which are on the left-hand side, Straubing, and on the right-hand side, Heidelberg. And in Straubing, we have a planning period of 1 month and about 30 physicians. And in Heidelberg, we already have planning periods of 2 months and 60 physicians. So you already can see in Heidelberg, it will be a lot more complex than in Straubing. Also in Straubing, we have 5 clinical wards, and in Heidelberg, we have 10. So this makes the problem even more complicated. And there also in Straubing, the rule of assigning physicians to some wards is a bit relaxed. So in Straubing, it's the rule is that if somebody is assigned to a certain ward, they should work in a certain ward the weeks after it. So you don't want to have too much hopping in and out of wards. Whereas in Heidelberg, the physicians belong to one specific ward and they can only work in this ward. So this makes it even more complex in Heidelberg. In Straubing, we have this block situation I just told you about. So, for example, there's the functional duty, which is a very nice duty to have. So not all shifts are necessarily bad to have, because the functional duty is actually a quite easy one, and you can do fun stuff such as, for example, research, but it comes at a price. So if you have in Straubing the functional duty from Monday to Thursday, you will also have to cover the night shifts the weekend after. There are some specific single duties, for example, on holidays that exist in Straubing, but most of them are blocks of duties. And in Heidelberg, we do have single duties. So there we have 5 night duties each day and 1 late evening duty each day as well. So you can see the problem in Heidelberg is quite a bit harder to solve than in Straubing. Okay, here's just a very small excerpt of the mixed integer program model. It's a little larger, but I'll show you the most important constraints. So the first constraint is pretty obvious. Each physician must be assigned to one physician must be assigned to each duty. So all duties are covered. Then also what we have to do is for the ward duties, we have to meet the minimum and maximum coverage constraints. So the sum of the team duty assignment of over the physicians for a team duty must be larger than the minimum number of required physicians and less or equal than the maximum number of physicians. And then if we have the block structure, we have the constraint at the very bottom. So there exists another variable which is called block assignment, which is a binary variable, as well as duty assignment. Sorry for that, I should have mentioned that. And this means that if duty belongs to a block and this block assignment variable is 1, it forces the duty assignment variable to be 1 as well. That's what this constraint does. And the other way around, if a physician is not assigned to a block, so that block assignment is 0, then the duty assignment is also forced to be 0. Okay, so much about the integer programming formulation. So as I've mentioned, there are also the constraints for the qualification and so on, but those are the most basic constraints. And I'm pretty sure from this base on, you could probably make up the integer program yourselves. They are not all that hard. So for the objective functions, we have actually multiple criteria that are important here. So first off, the first part of the objective function is we want to assign the desired number of physicians to a team duty. So we want to rather be closer to the maximum number of physicians and not too close to the required one. Then the next one is how much does the schedule suit the wishes of the physicians? So that's what the suitability variable does. So if a physician is assigned to a certain duty, the objective function gets this suitability term, which is positive if the physician says, yes, I want to work that duty. And it can also be negative if the physician says, no, I absolutely don't want to. And also, what we have is the preferences. No, what I just talked about is, yeah, this is actually, okay. So what you will see now are quite some screenshots of our application. And this web application it runs on a local server at the hospitals. And it is used to collect all the input data. So an administrator can make up which duties are automatically created. And the physicians can then log in and give us their wishes for what they want to, what or where they want to work. It's very customizable. So you've seen we have 3 hospitals, and each of them has different different requirements, and still it's working in all of those 3. So you can customize quite a bit. So what you see here is kind of the start screen of it for the administrator, and we have two planning periods here for July and August 2023. Next, this is how a duty is created. So you see we have quite some options that allows us to create different duties, and this is a holiday duty. So you can see here this is a duty on a holiday, and you have to work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And this is created Monday to Friday and only on holidays. That's this tick and only on holidays. Also, it must be occupied, so you can also remove that tick, and then this gets transformed to a soft constraint. So it's desired that this duty is occupied, but it's not mandatory. But in this, we set the tick, so this is mandatory to be occupied. And it is generated as a single duty without a duty block. And then next we see the resting times. So here we have 11 hours to mandatory resting time after the physician finished, and the desired resting time is 15 hours. And also at the very back, you can add the penalty term that you would like to have in your objective function. Well, next, how duty blocks are created. Here you can see how this works. So, well, basically, you can just add a list of certain duty types. So we've seen in Straubing, there exists this function from Monday to Thursday, and then you have to work night duty Friday and Saturday after that. And this is how such a duty block can be created. So you can also include different duty types within one duty block, which is actually really useful, and in Straubing wouldn't work without this function. Yeah, and then this is how it in the end looks for the administrator. So the blue one are the single duties, and the purple ones are the team duties. And there you can see who is assigned, and you can also see, for example, in the team duties, there are several duties that are assigned to more than one physician, such as Wednesday, the third from the top, which is assigned to Adam and Karen. Okay, let's get to some computation with real-world data. And for this, we took the kind of hardest to compute in Heidelberg. And we actually got down to an optimality gap on 3% using Skip Optimizer. So Skip is an open source and license-free mixed integer programming solver, and it actually works really good. Of course, Gurobi is a little better, but Gurobi is quite expensive as well. And the computation time is about 8 to 10 minutes for each of those instances. And concerning that, you don't really need that answer super immediately. I think that is somewhat, we got it down to a somewhat acceptable level. And actually, most of the time is spent building the model. So there's still some room where we maybe could be better. And yeah, this is actually what 3 of our hospitals do, which is absolutely great. It works pretty reliable. And in our next step, what we want to do is we want to finalize the web interface. So there's just some little tiny things that we would like to get to, like the really good software. And well, then we want to actually do investigation on how this software creates plans in those 3 hospitals. What we in our future research want to do is we want a replanning. So what usually happens quite often in hospitals is that generated rosters might be great, but if somebody is sick or has to leave on shorthand notice, they are often quite unstable. So what we want to do is to do a little research on robust optimization to, in the first place, create rosters that are robust, so they are easy to reschedule, and then also to have a rescheduling algorithm and integrate it into the web interface. Okay, that leaves me with the first part of the presentation. So I'll now go over to the second part. And in this part, I want to present the project Akut and also the resulting software. We'll have a short literature overview, really short. I will present to you the underlying algorithm and the real-world impact that we had with this software. And at the very end, I will show you some really cool new developments that I recently did and that I think are really beneficial to the software overall. But let's again start with motivation. And remember, now we are no longer in hospitals, but we are in the problem of preventing damages and cure during fluvial flood events. And as a consequence of climate change, those heavy rainfall events will increase in intensity and frequency. And if you look at what has happened in the last future, we had in Germany 2021, I don't know if you've heard about that here in Colombia, but there was a huge flood and over 170 people died there. Then we had Pakistan in 2022, we had Slovenia and Libya in 2023, we had Dubai, China, Brazil, Germany, Austria in 2024. Just yesterday I saw the news that Sudan has huge problems as well. So this list grows and grows and grows, and it just confirms what researchers have found out about climate change anyways. So I'm pretty sure we can continue this list next year, which is a very sad thing. And we as an OR community can of course ask the question, can we use OR to be somewhat better prepared? And this is what we did in the project ACU. So this was funded by the Federal Ministry of Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. And what we had two partners from academia, which is the University of Applied Sciences in Mainz, which is in Western Germany, and the TU Munich, where I was working. Then we had also industry partners. They were one engineering office and one civil engineering office. And then we also had 3 municipalities that supported us with their experiences because they recently had problems with heavy rainfall events, which also were very valuable. And the central outcome is a full-featured web application for computing precautionary concepts, achieving high-quality protection. Short excerpt of the literature, and although this is a super important topic considering climate change, the literature on that topic is surprisingly limited. So this is basically all the relevant literature, and the most close one was due to TASSEF in 2021. So he also designed precautionary measures for pluvial flash floods, but he also said in this paper that it doesn't scale well enough to real-world scenario. And what we did is we made it work in the end. So we took a little of a different approach than TASSEF, and you'll see the approach in just a minute. And this actually works for municipalities, not yet cities. So cities are still a bit large, but if you're managing a city anyways, the approach would be to divide the cities into smaller sub areas. Okay, let's talk a bit about the input data, because this is absolutely not obvious. So the first and probably most important input data is rain volume, because we want to talk about rain events. So this is measured as the total rain volume per square meter, and those data are provided by the German Weather Service in the COSTA database. So you can all over Germany see how much rain you will have to expect in a certain event. Well, then, by the way, those data also exist for other countries, and I'm currently working on that. Then we have buildings, because something has to take damage in our problem. So the buildings are provided as shapes or polygons, and they also have a susceptibility for flash floods, which is called the damage class, and this takes a value of 1 to 4. So for the example of damage class 1, take the example of a garage. So if a garage is flooded, it's bad, but it's not so bad. But 4 might, for example, be an electricity plant or a hospital. So there would be really bad if this is damaged. And also those data are provided by the cadastre service, which is called ALKIS in Germany. But you could also get those data from OpenStreetMaps, and we'll see more about that later. Then we have the digital terrain model, and I'll just call that DTM in the following. This is a 1x1 meter grid describing the geodesic height. So just imagine it as a 1x1 meter checkerboard, where for each checkerboard field you can see the geodesic height, which is the same as the height above sea level. And this is modeled used to model the runoff behavior. And those data can also be accessed by governmental institutions in Germany, but this is not limited to Germany, so it does, there are similar services in other countries. And lastly, what we need something to optimize over. And these are basins, ditches, and embankments. So on the right-hand side, you see a screenshot of my software. By the way, anything that looks like a map with polygons on it, that's a screenshot of the software that we wrote. So here you can see possible locations for basins, which are the polygons, the dark ones. Then we have ditches, which are the dark lines, and embankments, which are the bright lines. And as an additional information, they get a height or depth and a cost, and the data are provided by the user. And the good thing is that usually municipal workers know pretty much exactly where they could possibly build something. And what our software then does, or what the aim of the problem is to find a subset of actions that provides best possible protection while also respecting certain budget. So as an example, very short to give you an idea of what we're doing, this is just like a line segment of our digital terrain model. So all my examples will be such line segments, so they will be in 1D, but transcending to 2D will be really easy. And now we have on the middle segment, we have the possibility of building a retention basin, and on the right-hand side, we have a house. And what happens if we do not build the retention basins? Well, nothing happens to the geodesic height, and then the water flows downhill. Well, I think you know this about water. And this means that water builds up at the house, and then the house takes damage. Whereas if we build the retention basin, well, then this changes the flows of the water. And then the water will occur at the retention basin, so the house is protected. And that's basically the idea of our algorithm. So here's a short overview of the overall algorithm. And the cool thing is that this algorithm relies on a lot of small little details, and it wouldn't work without leaving one of those details. So what we first have to do is we have to transform our grid into a directed graph. I mean, since we're coming from the field of OR, this is what we usually do and what we feel comfortable with. And this grid graph then has topological sorting in the truest sense of the word. And it contains about 1 to 12 million nodes for realistic instances. So you already see, if you've been into optimization, that's a bit hard to optimize over. So what we next have to do is we will have to reduce the graph size, since it's the main determinant of our problem instance. So the idea is to reduce the graph size while maintaining a somewhat realistic representation of the terrain. This reduces the number of nodes between a factor of 300 and 4,000, depending on how much unnecessary nodes you have and how hilly it is. So there's certain factors that impact the reduction factor here, but that's quite a bit. And now, if we have this reduction, we're more in areas where we can start optimizing those. What we next do is we compute a start solution. And what we actually do is we evaluate the water flow if no actions are taken at all, because this is always a feasible solution. It doesn't depend on what budget you have. This will always be a feasible solution. And we will also look at how this can be done efficiently in more detail in a second. Then we have a mixed integer programming formulation. And this one has 44 types of constraint. And don't worry, I will not bore you out with showing you all of those 44 types of constraint. So we will only see the most important idea that finally made this mixed integer program work here. And the last thing is we have to add some pre-solvent cuts. So solving it plain vanilla does only work for unrealistically small instances. And the main idea is find nodes that are never or always flooded. So independent of what combinations of actions you take, there are certain nodes of which you definitely know they will be flooded or they cannot be flooded in any scenario. Okay, this gave us a very crucial speed up, and it would not be possible for our software to work in practice without those pre-solved algorithms. Okay, so I promised you to see how we can compute a start solution, and for this we will have the algorithm itself on the left-hand side, and we will have a little example on the right-hand side, so you can just easily follow along. What we first do is, for each node in the graph, we initialize its access to 0, and then we compute the flows. So for this, we start with the highest node in the graph, which is V, and then we distribute rain times the area plus the inflows into that node along the outgoing arcs of V. So in this case, V is the highest node of the graph, so it doesn't have any incoming arcs. So the sum on the right-hand side will be 0. But then we continue with the next highest non-leaf node. And now you see why we have the sum here, because now this node has flows on incoming arcs. And well, we do this as long as we do have unprocessed nodes. And then we have computed all the flows. And what we next do is we compute the proportion, which we denote by p hat, of the rain event needed, such that the first leaf node, which we denote by v hat, is filled up. And by filled up, I mean this situation. So filled up means that the water level equals the absolute height difference of the node and its lowest parent. Okay, so then we update the excesses, which means we simulate exactly that proportion of the rain event. So what we do is, for each leaf node, we increase the excess of this leaf node by p hat times the rain on this node plus the inflows into this node. And then we update the graph by contracting v hat and its lowest parent, and then we adjust the area. And then we go back to 2. So we recompute our flows, and we do this until we end up in the other case, which means in the case where we have simulated the whole rain event. So in this case, we reduce p hat such that the sum of all proportions equals 1. So we have simulated the whole rain event. And then, well, we do the same as before, right? We just have to simulate the last bit of the rain event. And then what we have to do, well, we have merged quite some nodes, so we have to reverse this step that we did during the algorithm. So we have to recompute the water levels on the nodes that have been removed during the algorithm, but that's done really easy. Okay, now this algorithm takes quite long, and the reason is that it spends significant time in the subroutine that computes the flows. And the idea is to make this better is that the inflow into a node depends solely on its predecessors in the graph. So if you think this from the other way around, this means that if nothing changes above a node in the graph, well, the flows will stay the same. And for this, I also brought you a little example. So this is iteration 1. We compute the flows, we compute the excesses. So the first leaf, which is the 4th node from the left, is filled up. And then we merge this with its lowest parent. And that's the situation we're in at the start of iteration 2. And now what we see about those flows is that, well, they stay the same because nothing has changed above them in the graph. So this leaves us with only one more flow to compute instead of recomputing the flows for the whole graph. So actually, we only have to recompute flows on a really small proportion on the graph. And this led to a total speed of the overall algorithm of 90%. So that was really huge. And there was a reason for that. I didn't expect it to work that well. But the reason why this saves so much time is that the contracted nodes often have a rather low geodesic height. So the part of the graph that you have to recompute the flows on is really, really, really small. Also, what we did is we used a Fibonacci heap to extract the node that is contracted with the lowest errand. So this yields another 25% speed up after those 90% speed up. Okay. Now let's see how the idea of the mixed integer programming combination works. And the problem is that imitating somewhat the logic of the graph algorithm that I just presented doesn't work for realistic instances. And the main reason is that the time indexing makes the number of variables too large, because you have number of nodes times number of time steps, which, yeah, you don't know the number of time steps beforehand. And so you can upper bound it by the number of nodes, so you kind of end up with n squared variables with O n squared variables, which is simply too large. And what we used is a certain property, and this property is just a behavior of our algorithm. For two adjacent nodes, U and V, with positive water level, it holds that the sum of the water level and the geodesic height is the same. And you can see this in the second and third node of the graph. So what we do is we call an arc-full if the water level at the end node of the graph plus the geodesic height in the end node of the graph is larger or equal than the geodesic height of the start node of the arc. And in this case, we imply the constraint that the sum of the water levels and the geodesic heights must be the same. And this makes actually the number of variables linear in the size of the graph. And now this allowed us to solve this mixed integer problem. Okay, let's talk a bit about the practical impact that we achieved with this software. And I think then we are right on time. So the approach was implemented as a web-based decision support system, and it can be used free of charge. And the data is available to German municipalities. I'm currently working on making this available beyond Germany. And just to show you a bit of the potential here, on the left-hand side, you have the situation if nothing is built. And then we have our suggested actions in the middle, and on the right-hand side, the water levels. So on the right-hand side, you can see what happens if the suggested actions are actually taken. And you can see, well, the situation is a lot better. We can see much more houses are actually white, and but just a few of them are still being built. This brings us back to our original questions. Can we use OR to elaborate high-quality flood mitigation concepts efficiently? The answer is yes, and we're currently doing this in Germany. And as I've said, I'm trying to bring that beyond Germany right now. This is a map of Germany and its 16 federal states, and we're almost having all of them blue. So there's 4 missing, and I'm really keen to get those 4 blues. We have 78 registered users that have not yet actively computed anything. They are still trying to organize their data, but we have 36 users on the platform that by now have computed flood mitigation concepts with our software. The variety of users is also quite large. So biggest part are municipalities and authorities, but we also have engineering offices, because this just speeds up their daily work. And then we also have some academic research group, and some professors also use our software in teaching already. What we also have managed to do is we were mentioned in some newspaper outlets. So this is the Süddeutsche Zeitung, which is one of the major news outlets, and to be honest, my favorite one actually. So I was really happy when that happened. And what I was even more happy about is that we won the prize for OR for the common good this year. So the Euro is the European Union of Researchers of OR. So this was a quite competitive prize, and I was super happy that that worked. I want to leave you with 2 last slides. of my current developments, and I think this will really benefit the software a lot. And what I thought about is that was the number here, 78 users that are still trying to organize their data. That's just too much for me. And what I thought is, what if we could just fetch the input data from open source API? So you actually don't have to worry about getting your input data. And then how you get your heavy rainfall concept would be super simple, because you could just draw a polygon on a map. So this is a screenshot of the new version of my software. And then the software actually fetches the data from OpenStreetMap. So you get the buildings from there, and the digital terrain model from some other open source APIs. So there are some. And then what you can do is you can create those maps. So this is from my new software. It has some nice features to get some nicer evaluations of the rain events. And then you can start preparing for your next heavy rain event. So it basically comes down to drawing the polygon on the map. And this is really amazing. Okay, and that's the end of my talk, I think. Oh, yeah, that's the end of my talk. The rest are backup slides.
Thank you, Jan, for your interesting presentation and two interesting applications. Now we have time for a couple of questions, or like 10 minutes for questions. So if you want to make your question, you can make it with the chat. Or if any of the attendees want to make the question, just raise your hand. I'm going to give you
the audio here is really low.
So maybe it could be better if you write your questions.
No, Nubia made it work.
Okay. So I have a question to start. You in the second application, because in the first application you talk about 3 hospitals, but in the second application you have like more than 7, almost 80 people working in your application. How did you get that number? How you engage new users in your applications, the promotion, teaching things?
Yeah, I think actually the number of coworkers I had was really beneficial, because I have a mathematics background. So from my education at Uni of Kaiserslautern, I just studied pure mathematics. So when I got into that project, I had literally 0 ideas about how actually heavy rainfall events impact buildings, and how water behaves, except that water flows downhill. I think everybody knows that. But apart from that, I literally knew nothing. And this whole team engaged very well with each other. And I was actually really happy to work in that team. So it was at times hard to coordinate. That, of course, is a problem. But yeah, the team really made this work in the end. So a lot of credits go to the team in the end. Yeah, I think also, especially having the experiences from the municipalities really made this project benefit. And also that's how we got this project kind of big when we had our first application. Also, what sadly got this application big is that we released our first somewhat stable software. By now, I wouldn't call it stable, but it was somewhat stable in February 2021. And then in July 2021, we had that huge flash flood in Germany. And suddenly it was all over the news. And then that's how we got into the newspaper, because they wanted to write articles on that. And yeah, that's how we, I think this whole team as such made this grow and grow big and connect people from different backgrounds. And that's just the outcome of it. And I'm very grateful.
Oh, thank you for sharing with us this growing and the internal things of the project, because it's a huge project.
Absolutely.
If we can see.
Also, the University of Applied University of Mainz had quite a bit of organizational work. So I was lucky enough to not have too much.
I have a question, Jan. The two projects are part of a grant, or is a consultancy project, or
So,
how do you obtain the financial support to develop them?
yeah, the rainwater project was part of a grant. So actually, all this team of those 8 institutions were granted. The most of the money actually went to the TUM and TU Munich and the University of Applied Sciences in Mainz to fund 2 PhD positions. But then we had also the engineering office, but they didn't get that much. Yeah, and the municipalities actually, they were participating free of charge. They just said, okay, we think this has a potential, and we're agreeing on working on there. And yeah, that was great. And I think they got what they went for. And for the hospital project, this comes from a very funny background. So the wife of my PhD survivor is a surrogist.
Okay.
And she always complained about how her night shifts are totally random. And although they have some Excel table where they could enter their preferences, it doesn't work. So my PhD supervisor started working on that, and then we just used my permanent PhD position, or a permanent PhD position, after the project with the heavy rainfalls just went out of time to work on that topic.
¿Alguien de
Felipe,
los tiene una pregunta
Felipe,
adicional? Gracias. Señora.
Felipe tiene la mano arriba.
Ah, ok. Adelante, Felipe, si quieres hacer la pregunta. Adelante.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Jan, for your presentation. Both projects are very interesting. And I have some question about the first one. I want to know about what are the preferences that you consider for the physicians in the rostering, and also how do you manage the objectives, because you consider different kind of objectives, and how you manage that into your solution. And finally, what happened when the problem is infeasible, when, I don't know, the people is not enough, or some constraint is not working? What happened with the application in general, and in the problem when it's not feasible?
Okay. All right. Nice to meet you, Felipe. Then let's start with the questions. I'll do them in reverse because that is easier to recall for me. So if the program is infeasible, this actually, if you would implement it as hard constraints everywhere, this would definitely happen. So what we do, actually, the constraints I show you, they are done as soft constraints. So there are penalty terms that in the objective functions, that allow you to violate certain constraints. And this always makes it feasible, but you get a warning if this is the situation. So if it doesn't find what would be feasible solution, but has to violate some constraints, it also gives you a warning that this is violated, but there is just no other way. And then I think that's also a fair solution. So the second question,
How do you manage the different objectives in
how we manage the different objectives? We just give them weight terms. So basically what we do is a weighted sum if you're into multi-objective optimization. This is also something we have thought about. So it would be nice if we would be able to do multi-objective optimization on that, and then have several plans and have spider diagrams. So yeah, the operators could see, okay, well, we have several options. Let's see what we do here. And the third one was, the first question was about the preferences. So the preferences of the physicians are also completely customizable. Usually what we have is, I would like to work there, I don't mind, or I do absolutely not want to work there. And what we also do, you can do a limitation on the number of I do not want to work there. Because then some could exploit our software and just take I do not want to work everywhere, and then they well, there's still another part of the objective function which distributes the duties in a fair way, but I think this this upper bound on I do not want to work there yeah, enforces them to really tell us when they really do not want to work, and yeah, they might be able to work. Is that kind of answer?
Okay. Thank you very much.
And I know that Felipe had another question like this. What the optimization software that you use in the first problem?
Yeah, it's called Skip. Yeah, SCIP. Okay. Yeah. It's a really good solver. I could highly recommend it. Yeah, Mark Lübecker was involved, and also Tobias Achterberg, which is funnily enough now working at Gorobi. Yeah, so he switched sides.
Any other question? ¿Alguna otra pregunta? If not, Jan and Nubia, thank you very much for organizing the conference. And Jan, thank you for the initiative to present and to share your work with us. I don't know if you want to say anything else. If not, we are going to close the meeting and to have the conference.
Well, again, thanks to Nubia and Juan, I think it was amazing to present this and have the chance to present this at such a huge organization. And well, also, I'm really enjoying Colombia. I'm having a great time here. Yeah, it's good memories.
Maybe, I don't know, Jan, if you want to share with us your email in case of someone wants to contact you or collaborate with you in the future.
I'm always happy to spread the word, to see if we can get the research even further. So my email is jan.boeckmann@jku.at. Maybe I'll just type it into the chat if you want to save it.
I will send it by the chat since I have the.
Okay. And otherwise, just Google me at JKU, or I think if you just Google me, my name is quite unique. Not many people with my name there, so you will probably find me quite easily. We're also on LinkedIn. Feel free to contact me there.
Okay. And thank you, Jan.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for your attendance. Bye.
We were talking with my PhD by chat, and they